Have you stopped to think about what is happening around the world? What seemed impossible is starting to happen. Wars, natural disasters, a global economy in crisis, and you, amidst all of this, have you ever asked yourself, am I prepared for what's to come? Imagine your world here. Suddenly, you can no longer buy anything. You can no longer live your life the way you always have, simply because the global economic system demands a radical choice from you. Sounds like science fiction, right? But what if I told you that the future is already starting to unfold? You seem to already be living in a world in transformation. Or have you not yet seen what is happening? What you don't know may be more dangerous than you imagine. We are seeing global events aligning exactly with what is described in the biblical prophecies. Natural disasters, wars, economic crisis, political tensions. Do you feel that something is about to happen? The question is not whether the end times are coming, but when. If you've ever felt the weight of the world pressing down on you and wondered if you're really prepared for what's to come, this video is for you. Imagine, for a moment, being forced to make a choice between faithfulness to your faith and the need for survival. How would you react if your faith were centered on such a crucial decision? Are you ready to explore what the Bible predicted about the Antichrist's global economic system and how it will affect your life? It's not a fiction story. It's the reality of a world preparing for total control over everything you buy, sell, and even think. Don't stop now. In this video, we will explore all of this and how the prophecies are being fulfilled before our eyes, radically changing what we know about the world and our way of life. Don't leave before understanding how this story relates to your faith, your future, and your decisions. Subscribe to the channel now and stay up to date with all the signs that are being left for each of us. Don't miss the chance to understand the impact of global changes on your life as the future begins to reveal itself. What you're going to discover here will change your view of the world we live in and prepare you for what's coming. BRICS Summit of October 2024 in Kazan in October 2024. An event occurred that could have changed the course of history, but what many don't know is that, despite the importance of this meeting, it was almost ignored by the Western media. Have you ever wondered why the biggest global events are often sidelined, while we are bombarded with repetitive news about subjects that don't always have a real impact on our lives? The BRICS Summit, which took place from October 22nd to 24th in Kazan, Russia, is a perfect example of how major events can be overshadowed by the media. The summit was attended by 36 countries, but what makes this event even more intriguing is that it did not receive the attention it deserved. BRICS, composed of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, represents a growing force on the global stage. But why didn't the media talk more about it? Are they trying to hide something from us? Have you ever realized how the media can manipulate what you see and hear? It's as if, suddenly, important events are put in the background, while other, often more superficial issues receive the spotlight. This is not something we should ignore. But let's get back to the summit. Imagine an event of such importance, where leaders of countries with billions of people come together to discuss how to improve their economies and influence the future of the world. Yet, the vast majority of the global population had no clue what was happening. Why does this happen? What if the media only shows you what they want you to see? Behind this indifference is a distraction strategy where the focus is elsewhere, while major changes are being made behind our backs. Now, have you thought about the impact of the summit on the future? With 36 countries coming together, we are talking about a group with immense resources and, most importantly, with growing economic power. What are they discussing? How can they become more independent from the global financial system, like the dollar, which dominates nearly all international transactions? What does this mean for you? The change in global economies could directly affect your wallet, your way of consuming, and even your financial freedom. What would happen if, suddenly, the dollar was no longer the currency that rules the world? Would this change the way we live? It sounds like a science fiction movie, right? But BRICS leaders are discussing exactly that. How to build an independent financial system away from reliance on the dollar. And here's the most interesting part. They want to create their own currencies and, even more, conduct transactions between them without relying on intermediaries like the US dollar. This is already being done, with some bilateral transactions occurring without the need to use the US currency. This may seem like a small thing, but imagine the impact of this in the future. Can you imagine a world where the dollar is no longer the main currency? How would this impact your life? This change could be the key to a new balance of power in the world. BRICS is taking steps to create a new financial system where the participating countries will have more control over their economies and less influence from the U.S. financial system. It's as if they're preparing for a new era where the U.S. dollar is no longer the main economic force. Can you see how BRICS is taking a step toward taking command of the global economic future? This movement is happening before our eyes, but are we paying attention? The reality is that, while the media focuses on issues like the U.S. presidential elections, BRICS is redrawing the global economic map. If you think this won't affect your life, think again. Large-scale financial changes can directly impact everything from inflation to your purchasing options and even your relationship with other countries. What if, suddenly, you had to live in a world without the dollar as the main currency? How would you prepare for that? By understanding all of this, you realize that there is something much bigger at play here. BRICS is not just meeting to discuss trade exchanges. They are meeting to change the rules of the game. Imagine if you were on a team where suddenly the rules completely changed. What would you do? How would you prepare for this new scenario? Does this world, where BRICS can change the global economy, seem distant? Do you think this wouldn't affect your life? Think again. Like if you think BRICS can change the future of the world economy, and leave a comment about what you think about a world without the dollar. Now, I invite you to reflect a little more on what is happening and think about how you can prepare for these changes. Have you stopped to think about how this might affect your finances? And more importantly, are you really prepared for a world with a new economic reality? Focus on the U.S. elections. Have you noticed how the eyes of the world are constantly focused on the U.S. presidential elections? It seems like everything happening around the planet loses importance when compared to the American political race. Major decisions, geopolitical movements, economic crises. All of this takes a backseat when the U.S. media starts narrating, in great detail, the steps of their candidates. If you haven't noticed, something much bigger is happening while you watch, without questioning, the media's obsession with the candidates. Have you ever stopped to think why the media is so focused on a single subject? What might they be preventing you from seeing? Let's try to understand a little more about this. The American media is saturated with information about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Every little gesture, every word, every interview is analyzed for something that could give an advantage in the presidential race. It seems like the whole world is watching the U.S., and all other issues seem to be pushed aside. And you know what's curious? While we're all fixated on these elections, far more important global issues are going unnoticed. The BRICS Summit, which took place in October 2024, is a clear example of this. Millions of people around the world didn't even know this event was happening. And why is that? Don't you realize how the media chooses what you should or shouldn't know? Behind this indifference is a distraction strategy, where the focus is elsewhere while major changes are being made without our knowledge. Seems strange, doesn't it? While the eyes are on the details of the elections, the biggest economic and geopolitical movements in modern history are happening in the shadows. And who is controlling us? Who is dictating what should be seen and heard? We're not just talking about an event in Kazan, Russia, where 36 countries gather to decide on global financial independence. We're talking about a future where the economies of the West may start to lose strength and power, while countries like China, Russia, Brazil, and India gain more autonomy. This scenario could change everything, but it is being overshadowed by an electoral spectacle in the U.S. What would happen if you were a victim of a global distraction strategy? This is more than a political issue. It's a matter of perception. If you're trapped in this distraction bubble created by the elections, you're missing the opportunity to understand the movements that will truly shape your future life. Have you thought about how the way you see the world could be changing without you knowing? Wouldn't it be more interesting to look at events that really affect your pocket, your freedom, and your future? After all, what's happening in the U.S. might have a local impact, but what's happening around the world could permanently change the way we live. Why not look beyond what the media is offering you? If you really want to be prepared for the future, now is the time to broaden your horizons and understand what really matters. And here comes a crucial point. The U.S. elections, although important, are just a distraction in a much more complex global scenario. Imagine this situation. While the whole world is debating the next steps of Trump or Harris, in Russia, Putin is making a call for BRICS countries to move away from the dollar and the Western financial system. And you know what's more surprising? While the United States focuses its energies on something that may only change its internal politics, BRICS is taking firm steps toward a global economic revolution. But the media decides that the presidential race is more important, or at least, that's what we want you to think. Have you ever felt like the media is deciding what you should think is important? And the big question that arises from all of this is, how far could this go? What are we missing by focusing our attention only on a single event that, in the end, won't directly affect most of our lives as deeply as global events? And most importantly, are you prepared for the impact of global changes that aren't being revealed as they should be? If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now so you won't miss a single detail about what's happening in the world. Now, if you're wondering what this has to do with the future of BRICS and the impact of these changes, the answer is right here. Instead of focusing on the elections, we need to look at the real power movements. What Putin is doing and how this could affect your life and the future of the world. Do you want to know what's next and how all this could impact your future? Stay with me and see how BRICS can change the game. Putin's appeal to BRICS countries. During the BRICS summit of October 2024, one of the most notable moments was Vladimir Putin's appeal to the member countries. He didn't just suggest it, but directly called for BRICS nations to move away from the US dollar and the Western banking system. It may seem like a bold move, right? One of the world's greatest leaders at a global event, directly challenging the planet's strongest currency and the financial system that has dominated international transactions for decades. But what does this really mean for you in the future of the world? Have you ever stopped to think about how we still depend on the dollar for almost everything? From buying goods at the supermarket to fuel prices and even global investments, the dollar is the currency that drives the world's financial flow. Now, imagine a world where this dominance starts to decrease. How would this affect your pocket, your purchases, your work, and even your financial freedom? What Putin is suggesting is nothing less than a silent financial revolution. Can you imagine a world where the dollar is no longer the central point? Putin's appeal goes beyond just criticizing the Western financial system. He is calling on BRICS countries to strengthen themselves financially, creating a system that allows economic independence without having to rely on the dollar as an intermediary. It sounds like a grand idea, but the obstacles are huge. For this to actually happen, these countries would need to build an alternative currency, a banking network of their own, and payment systems that can compete with the global financial system that dominates the world today. But why is this so important? The answer lies in these countries' ability to protect themselves from economic fluctuations and the abuses that come with the dependency on the dollar. It's not just a financial matter, but also about sovereignty and control over their own economies. Imagine what would happen if you were forced to use a currency that isn't yours, one that is vulnerable to external manipulations. How much of your life is being controlled by a system that doesn't provide you with autonomy? And furthermore, have you stopped to reflect on the impact that BRICS' growing independence could have on your life in the future? Now, here comes the big twist. Putin is leading the way, but he is not alone. Other BRICS countries, such as China and India, are increasingly distancing themselves from the Western financial system. Instead of relying on transactions in dollars, they are creating new channels to do business with each other, without the need to resort to the American currency. This is not just an economic strategy. It's a direct challenge to the global power of the US. Can you see the impact of a global movement challenging the economic system that dominates the world? How do you think this could change the world we live in? Although this transformation is still in its early stages, it has the power to deeply change global economic and political dynamics. In the long term, countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa could form such a strong bloc that it would begin to rival Western powers. The real question then is, how would you prepare for a world where these powers have more control over global financial flows? But what Putin is doing here is not just an act of resistance. He is creating a new path for the future, where BRICS economies no longer depend on the fluctuations of a single currency. Imagine a scenario where the economies of these countries can thrive without worrying about the instability of the dollar or the policies of distant central banks. If the BRICS countries can build an alternative financial system, what will this mean for the future of global trade and your own economy? Instead of just looking at what's happening in the American political scene, we need to start focusing on what is unfolding around the world. What is happening with BRICS could be one of the most significant changes we will see in the coming years. And here's the big question. Are you prepared for the impact of a new economic world? While the media and the world's attention are fixed on the US elections, important movements are happening. And BRICS could be one of the biggest catalysts for this change. Are you aware of the possible consequences that BRICS could bring to the future of the global economy? If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now to stay updated on all the changes that are coming. Now, moving on to the next topic, let's begin exploring how digital currencies and future financial control may align with these global changes. Are you ready to understand how these economic transformations could affect your life? Stay tuned and follow the next chapter. Bilateral currency exchanges. One of the most significant moves made by BRICS countries during the 2024 summit was the creation of bilateral channels to exchange currencies directly, without the need for the dollar as an intermediary. It may seem like a small step, but this is a massive move that is challenging the global dominance of the dollar, and its impacts could be profound for the world economy. Now, imagine a world where, instead of relying on the dollar, countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa can conduct transactions directly between each other, using their own currencies. What does this really mean for all of us? It almost sounds like a science fiction movie, doesn't it? A reality where the dollar is no longer king. Let me tell you a secret. We're closer to this reality than you think. For decades, the US dollar has been the world's primary reserve currency. This means that almost all international transactions, from buying oil to selling goods between countries, are conducted in dollars. The dollar has been the backbone of the global economy. But now, some of the world's most powerful countries are saying, enough, it's time to change. The decision to start bilateral currency exchanges is a clear challenge to the dollar. But what's most impressive is how this is being done gradually and strategically, instead of creating a single currency for BRICS, which would be a highly complex process. The countries have decided to take a more pragmatic approach, using their national currencies for direct transactions. This means that, for example, China can do business with Brazil without either nation needing to resort to the dollar. And this is happening at a faster pace than many realize. What does this mean for your future? When a global financial system that has dominated trade for so long starts to be challenged in this way, the global economy could undergo major transformations. Imagine a future where the value of the dollar no longer has the same impact on the prices of the products we buy. This could affect everything from the price of a simple bottle of water to the cost of essential items, like fuel and food. If BRICS countries start exchanging currencies directly, without the dollar as an intermediary, the demand for the American currency could decrease, which would directly affect its strength in the market. You can already see how this could change the way you live, can't you? But for this to happen, the transition will not be simple. Many obstacles still need to be overcome. For example, the creation of a unified currency for BRICS would face huge challenges. It wouldn't be simple to choose a currency that represents all the involved countries with different economies and financial systems. This would require unprecedented trust between these nations. And yet, this shift toward bilateral exchanges is already happening in a way that could weaken the dominance of the dollar. Additionally, another point that needs to be considered is the fact that even though currency exchanges are being made directly between BRICS countries, international transactions still require an efficient and secure financial communication system. This brings us directly to the next topic, where we'll explore the role of the SWIFT system, which is a backbone of the global banking system and still exerts significant control over how money circulates in the world. Imagine a world where the dollar is no longer necessary for every global transaction. Seems like a distant future, right? But what we're seeing now is the beginning of a radical change in the global financial architecture. And as challenging as it may seem, this is exactly what BRICS is trying to achieve by creating these bilateral exchange channels. And who would have thought that in the near future, we could see a global financial system where the dollar is no longer the dominant currency? How do you think this would affect financial markets? Are you ready for the impact of a new economic world? But there is much more to come. The SWIFT system, which we mentioned, plays a key role in this process. It facilitates international financial transactions and is often pointed to as a tool that enables global control over the flow of money. What happens when the system begins to be challenged? Let's explore that in the next topic. Get ready to understand how SWIFT is directly tied to all of this and its impact on you. If you find these changes interesting, give a like and leave a comment saying what you think about this future without the dominance of the dollar. Now, if you want to learn more about the role of the SWIFT system and how it connects to all these changes, don't go away. The next topic will explain exactly how the system is crucial for global financial flows and what could happen when countries like BRICS decide to challenge the status quo. Are you ready to explore the impact of SWIFT on the economic future, the SWIFT system, and its role? When we talk about international transactions and the role of the dollar in global trade, we can't overlook SWIFT, which is one of the most important and invisible systems in the global economy. SWIFT, or Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, is essentially a network that facilitates communication between banks worldwide. Every time you make an international transaction, whether it's to buy something from another country or transfer money, it's very likely that SWIFT is involved in all of it. But what you may not know is the profound impact this system has on global finances and how it can now be challenged as BRICS is moving to create its own forms of bilateral transactions. Have you ever stopped to think about how SWIFT directly impacts every transaction you make, even without realizing it? It's present in almost every global financial transaction. And you know what's even more interesting? SWIFT has been a tool that allows control over the flow of money in a centralized way, often favoring large economies like the United States and Europe. This system was designed to ensure that international payments were quick and secure, but it also gives Western countries a tremendous advantage since it can be used as an economic weapon. That's right. SWIFT has been used to impose financial sanctions on countries opposing the U.S. and its allies' agendas. And at the heart of it all, the dollar remains the dominant currency, thanks to the network of transactions that SWIFT facilitates. And what happens when a group of countries begins to question the dominance of SWIFT and the dollar? That's the big question, and the answer is starting to unfold before our eyes. BRICS countries are on a journey to create an alternative to SWIFT, allowing direct transactions between them without relying on a system that has been a fundamental pillar of the global economy until now. What does this mean for the future of international transactions? Are you ready to see a world where SWIFT and the dollar could lose their power? Imagine a scenario where, instead of going through SWIFT, BRICS countries exchange currencies directly among themselves, as they are already starting to do. The impact of this could be gigantic. We're not just talking about a change in the way countries communicate financially, but about a possible weakening of the U.S. hegemony over the world financial system. This doesn't just jeopardize the dominance of the dollar, but also the centralization of global economic power. It almost sounds like a distant world, doesn't it? A world where financial control is no longer in one hand. This puts SWIFT in a vulnerable position, and countries seeking alternatives, like the members of BRICS, are slowly undermining this centralized structure. Can you imagine what would happen if SWIFT lost its dominance? For countries that are being pressured by sanctions, like Russia and China, an alternative to SWIFT could mean more economic freedom, allowing them to do business without interference from the U.S. And the impact of this on you, who depend on financial transactions, could be much bigger than you imagine. What happens when you have more control over your financial transactions and no longer need to depend on a network that can be manipulated? SWIFT, although it has been an efficient system for decades, may be becoming a relic of the past. New technologies like blockchain and alternatives created by BRICS are reshaping global finances and paving the way for a new financial system. It already sounds like a world where the global economy functions in a fairer and challenged way, where you no longer need to worry about a system controlled by the biggest powers. If you find these changes interesting, give a like and leave a comment about what you think of the possibility of a financial system challenged by BRICS. How would you prepare for this change? Have you started thinking about how this could affect your life in the future? If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now to stay updated on all the transformations happening in the global economy. What's coming next is even more fascinating. In the next topic, we'll explore how digital currencies are becoming an increasing force in global financial control. The rising use of these currencies could be a key factor in the change we're witnessing now. Are you ready to discover how digital currencies could impact the global economy? Stay with me. The best is yet to come. Decline of the dollar. The U.S. dollar, for a long time, has been the foundation of the global economy. It's the world's reserve currency, the currency that, in many cases, defines international trade, energy transactions, and global economic policies. But what many don't know, or prefer not to realize, is that the dollar is beginning to lose its power in a quiet but significant way. This decline in the dominance of the dollar brings profound implications for the economy and world politics, and its effects go far beyond what we can imagine. Have you already noticed that the dollar is no longer the king it used to be? Look around and notice how other countries like China, Russia, and even some BRICS nations are starting to act independently from the dollar. This may seem far from your reality, but its impact will reach you faster than you think. The decline of the dollar is not just a matter of currency value. It's related to how the world interacts financially and the power the United States exerts over other countries. What happens when the dollar begins to lose its influence over the global market? To understand the impact of this change, we need to look at the power the dollar has today. The dollar is not only the most widely used currency for international transactions, but it also serves as a kind of benchmark currency for other currencies. This means that when you go to the supermarket, when you buy gas, when you pay for your international travel, the price of these things is often directly tied to the value of the dollar. Can you imagine a world where you no longer have to worry about the dollar to buy what you need? This is a reality that may emerge with the gradual decline of this dominant currency, and the consequences of this go far beyond what you might expect. As the dollar loses its dominance, other financial systems are emerging, as we have seen with BRICS. International trade is beginning to be conducted in other currencies, such as the Chinese yuan, the Russian ruble, and even other regional currencies. What we are witnessing is the fall of the financial empire that the United States has built over decades. Are you ready for a world where the dollar is no longer the main currency that the global economy relies on? It sounds like a scary scenario, doesn't it? But the truth is that we are living this change, and it is happening right before our eyes. Now, you may ask yourself, how will this impact my life? Will it affect my bank account or the cost of the things I buy? The answer is yes. The decline of the dollar will likely affect your daily life directly. When the dollar loses value or becomes less relevant, the consequences for consumers are immense. The price of goods and services may rise, investments may become riskier, and ultimately, the quality of life could be negatively impacted. This is without mentioning how the United States, the largest economy in the world, will have to deal with this new economic scenario. What happens to a nation that, for decades, has had its economy based on a currency that is now beginning to lose strength? Moreover, the loss of relevance of the dollar means that the elections in the United States will no longer be about simple internal issues. They will have to deal with new global challenges. The impact of a weaker currency and a financial system that loses its centrality will be a recurring theme in political campaigns. How will the U.S. deal with internal and external tensions created by these changes? How will U.S. fiscal and trade policies be altered to adapt to a new global economic system? This will change the way the U.S. government interacts with the rest of the world and will likely affect trade negotiations, the price of goods, and even the country's competitiveness on the global stage. Have you thought about the impact of the next U.S. elections, now with a completely new and challenging global scenario? And most importantly, what does this mean for you? The decline of the dollar, although distant from your immediate understanding, will directly affect your future. The way you handle your finances, the goods and services you consume, and even your standard of living may be drastically altered. If the dollar loses its strength as a reference currency, you could see an increase in import costs, fluctuations in commodity prices, and even a rise in inflation. Moreover, this could directly affect the value of your savings, the cost of credit, and the purchasing power of the average citizen. How would you prepare for a world where the dollar is no longer the dominant currency? Now, one aspect that should be considered is the impact this has on international politics. The decline of the dollar could have significant consequences for global politics. Countries that were once trapped in the financial system controlled by the United States may begin to move more independently. The rise of blocs like BRICS could be the first step toward a new global financial system. The impact of this will not only be economic, but also political. How will this change the relationship between nations and your position in the world? The power that the United States has right now could be challenged in ways we never imagined. If you want to understand these changes better, download our free ebook with a complete analysis of the global economic future and how to prepare for this new world. Now, as you begin to prepare for this new financial reality, we need to look at the deeper meaning of this decline of the dollar, especially from the perspective of biblical prophecies. What do these economic changes mean for Christians? And how do they align with the warnings in scriptures like Revelation? It's time to reflect on what comes next and prepare for the spiritual impact of all this. Are you ready to understand the prophetic meaning behind all of this? Stay tuned and discover how the changes in the economic world align with the biblical prophecies about the end of times. Prophetic meaning for Christians. What is happening in the financial world today is not just an economic transformation. According to biblical prophecies, the global economic changes we are witnessing are aligning with what is predicted in the scriptures about the centralized control of the economy in the last days. In Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 17, we find a clear description of what the global economic system that is forming will look like, and this should be a concern for Christians who seek to understand the signs of the times. Does it seem that what is happening in the world is aligning with what the Bible predicts about the end of times? Prophecies reveal that there will come a time when everyone, without exception, will be forced to participate in a global economic system controlled by a centralized power. And, as described in Revelation, this will involve a system where people will not be able to buy or sell without submitting to a centralized authority, a figure who, in Christian theology, is often associated with the Antichrist. What we are seeing with BRICS trying to create an independent financial system and other economic blocs emerging around the world is, in a sense, a reflection of the changes that the scriptures predicted. We are not just witnessing a change in the global financial system. We are seeing a movement that may be leading us directly to the establishment of a unified global economic system, where individual freedom will be limited. Can you already see how the evidence of a centralized control is increasingly present in the world? The scriptures, specifically in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 17, speak of a time when the Antichrist, in his pursuit of absolute power, will create an economic system that will force all people, both great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to submit to a mark. This mark will be required in order to buy or sell anything. What if the system is beginning to be set up right now, and you are here, living in this crucial moment in history? The prophecy says that this mark will be placed on the right hand or forehead of each person, and without it, no one will be able to access the global economic system. Can you imagine a world where you can no longer buy or sell without having this mark? This is no longer a distant story or an abstract concept. We are seeing, in the current scenario, steps that could lead to this reality, where governments and international entities seek such massive economic control that it could be impossible to escape without this mark. If you think the world isn't heading toward a global economic control system, stop and think about the impact this could have on your life. In the current context, where we are increasingly being monitored, where the digitization of the economy is growing rapidly and digital currencies are gaining strength, it's impossible not to see the similarities with what the Bible predicts for the last days. But what do the scriptures really teach us about this global economic system? First, the scriptures warn us that this system will be a tool of economic coercion, used to manipulate and control the global population. It will be a form of pressure, forcing people to submit to a centralized authority in order to access their basic needs. Have you ever stopped to think about the spiritual impact this economic control could have on your faith? Imagine the psychological and spiritual pressure of having to make survival-based decisions, where your loyalty to the Christian faith will be challenged by this global financial system. Would your faith withstand this pressure? Now, as Christians, we need to understand that this change is not just a political or economic issue. It is a reflection of the fulfillment of biblical prophecies. Jesus warned us in Matthew chapter 24, verse 42, to be vigilant, for we do not know the hour when he will return. Vigilance is not only for the visible signs, but also for the economic and political changes that may be preparing the way for the events described in the scriptures. Are you watching for the signs of the times, or are you only focused on what the media wants you to see? Economic coercion, which is being discussed now in the context of digital currencies and global financial control, could be the first step toward the mark of the beast. And as described in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 17, this economic system will be global, without exception, and will place everyone under a single financial authority. This could start with initiatives like the digitization of currencies, where authorities could control and monitor every transaction. But the control doesn't stop there. The next step is when literally every human being will be forced to choose between their faith and their economic survival. This system that we are seeing develop, with the creation of digital currencies and the centralization of financial control, may be the prelude to a global system that, in the last days, will force the entire world population to make a decision, follow the system and be part of it, or be excluded. Would you be able to reject the global economic system in the name of your faith if the world were forced to make this decision? If you're beginning to see the spiritual impact of these changes, give a like and leave a comment saying what you think about the mark of the beast and whether the global economic system is aligning with what the Bible says. Now that we understand the spiritual implications of these economic changes, it's time to prepare for the next topic, where we will explore how this economic coercion is directly linked to the mark of the beast and how it might manifest in the last days. Are you ready to understand how the mark of the beast will impact the world and what you can do to prepare spiritually for this challenge? Stay with me. The best is yet to come. Economic coercion and the mark of the beast. When we read Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 17, the Bible gives us a very clear warning about what will happen in the last days. A global economic system will be created, and everyone will be forced to submit to the Antichrist in order to buy or sell. This biblical prophecy is not just an abstract scenario or a science fiction story. It describes a future that seems increasingly plausible as we move forward in history. The economic coercion that we are starting to see in the modern world, with tensions over the digitization of currency, centralized financial control, and attempts to create a global economic surveillance system, may be the first step toward creating the system the Antichrist will use to dominate the world. Have you ever imagined a world in which you can no longer buy anything without submitting to a centralized control system? The prophecy in Revelation speaks of a system where people won't even be able to buy simple food unless they accept the mark of the Antichrist. This mark is not just a physical symbol, but represents absolute control over the economy, over people's lives, over everything they do. As if that weren't scary enough, the Bible warns that this mark will be something people will be forced to take, not by choice, but out of necessity for survival. Can you imagine living in a world where your survival depends on a decision that takes away your freedom? The way the Antichrist will force people to take this mark is deeply tied to how the global economy is developing. More and more, we are seeing a convergence between the digitization of currencies, the introduction of technologies like facial recognition and biometrics, and the growing control of central banks. These elements are preparing the ground for a system where people will no longer have financial freedom unless they submit to the Antichrist central authority. What if this is already happening without you really realizing? As current technologies are being used to create this invisible control, you may not even notice when the transition to this new system takes place. Imagine a future where your financial transactions, your daily purchases, and even your access to essential goods depend on a global financial control system. The Antichrist will use the basic needs of survival, such as food, shelter, and security, as a form of coercion. People will be forced to choose between their faith in Christ and their material survival. Can you perceive the spiritual impact this will have on your faith? How would you react when the choice is clear and direct? Accept the system, the mark of the Antichrist, or be excluded from society? This is a reality the Bible predicts. The scriptures make it clear that this system will be implemented gradually, starting with greater financial surveillance and more control over people's money. As the world becomes increasingly digitalized and cryptocurrencies begin to dominate, we are starting to see a path that could lead directly to the implementation of this mark. It's no longer a matter of if, but when this will happen. Are you ready to face the moment when your faith will be tested in such a radical way? This economic control system that the Antichrist will use will not only be financial, but also spiritual. It will be a way to divert people from true worship of God and force everyone to submit to a leader who is diametrically opposed to the teachings of Christ. In Revelation chapter 13, verse 16, we see that the mark will be placed on the right hand or forehead, which can symbolically represent control over people's actions, hand and their mind's forehead. The mark is not just a physical symbol, but an act of submission to the Antichrist system. Imagine what it would be like to live in a world where control over what you can do becomes completely centralized. Would you have the freedom to act, to think, to believe? The Antichrist will use this system as a way to divide humanity, forcing those who refuse to accept the mark to live as outcasts, excluded from society, without access to essential goods. He will use economic pressure as a tool for spiritual domination, creating a dilemma for everyone. Follow the system and have material security, or remain faithful to God and risk survival. This is a critical point. Are you aware of the strength of this decision? Economic coercion will be one of the most powerful ways the Antichrist will control the masses. What is even more terrifying is that many people, without spiritual discernment, may be easily deceived, believing that this system is necessary for peace and security globally. But What the Bible teaches us is that this will be a false system, a system that does not bring peace but leads people to an eternity without God. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now to stay aware of all the changes happening in the world and how they align with biblical prophecies about the end times. But what will happen to those who refuse to accept the mark? What will happen to Christians who resist the economic pressure? Are you ready to learn about the cost of faithfulness to God in a world where accepting the mark of the Antichrist will be the only way to survive? Don't miss the next topic, where we'll discuss the implications of refusing the mark and what this means for Christians in the last days. Stay tuned because what's coming next is even more revealing. Are you ready to face the cost of faithfulness to God and morality in a world that's becoming more and more controlled? Implications of refusing the mark. When we talk about refusing the mark of the Antichrist, we are referring to a radical choice. In Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 17, the Bible warns us about a global economic system that will force everyone, without exception, to submit to a centralized authority represented by the figure of the Antichrist. Those who refuse to accept this mark, which will be necessary to buy or sell anything, will face serious implications. And these implications are not just a spiritual concern, but an existential and economic crisis. The impact of refusing this mark will be profound and devastating, affecting not only daily life, but also physical survival and people's relationship with the world around them. Does it seem like living in a world where your survival depends on accepting a global system could be the future reality? When someone refuses the mark, they are essentially excluding themselves from an economic system that will be the only way to access essential goods and services. Imagine not being able to buy food, medicine, water, or even pay for housing simply because you didn't submit to the system. This is not just a matter of faith. It's a matter of survival in a world where the Antichrist will have total control over the planet's resources. Can you understand the impact this will have on your life? For Christians, this refusal represents an extraordinary act of faith, but also an extremely difficult choice, because the society we will live in will be highly dependent on this centralized financial system, and the pressure to submit to this authority will be intense. At first, it might seem like a viable option to resist, but as the system grows, social and economic exclusion will become unsustainable. Do you know the feeling of being excluded from a community or society? Imagine being excluded from the entire global economy, unable to meet basic needs. By refusing the mark, Christians will be resisting the control of their actions and even their minds. The mark, as described in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 17, is not just a physical sign, but represents a symbolic act of submission to the Antichrist. Refusing the mark is therefore an act of resistance, not only economically but spiritually, and this resistance will come at a cost. What would it be like to live in a world where the cost of a spiritual decision could be hunger, exclusion, and the loss of freedom? Now, imagine a Christian living in a scenario like this. Options will become scarce, and difficulties will increase day by day. Christians who refuse to accept the mark will be forced to live on the margins of society, unable to buy or sell anything. Can you imagine living in a world where every day you have to decide between your faith and your survival? The dilemma will be cruel. For those who choose to follow Christ, the difficulties will be immense. They will need to find new ways to support themselves and their families, probably relying on other Christians who share their beliefs and values, forming a support network. Even so, the struggle will be daily. How would you prepare to face this kind of challenge in your life? The pressure will be immense. The Antichrist's global economic system will be entirely based on need. The need to eat, drink, and have access to medical care. Those who refuse the mark will be excluded from all these benefits. And the exclusion won't just be financial. It will also be social and psychological. The person will be stigmatized, seen as a threat to the new system, making life even more difficult. How much of your freedom would you be willing to lose by not submitting to this control? Moreover, the refusal of the mark will be an act of defiance against the system that controls everything. The Antichrist will use all means to punish those who oppose him, creating immense economic pressure. It will no longer be possible to survive in a society that depends on the global financial system. It will be a fight for survival, where the Christian will have to trust entirely in God to provide for daily needs. But the big question is, are you spiritually prepared to face the economic and spiritual persecution that will come? If you want to understand more about how to prepare for this reality and what the Bible says about the spiritual strength needed, Don't miss the opportunity to download our exclusive ebook. Meanwhile, as the world moves towards implementing the system, one of the most serious issues we face is how the growth of digital currencies and future control will align with this global movement. The increasing use of digital currencies, which are already being introduced by various governments and financial institutions, could be the key to creating the Antichrist global financial system. Are you ready to understand how digital currencies will play a crucial role in this new economic world? Stay tuned, as the next topic will explore exactly how this will affect global society, finances, and your personal life. Growth of digital currencies and future control. We are living in an era where the digitalization of finance is rapidly gaining ground, and the rise of digital currencies is a clear reflection of this movement. The increase in cryptocurrencies and digital currencies issued by governments is creating a new economic paradigm, which could have profound implications for our financial freedom and even for the global control of finances. What many don't realize is that by embracing digital currencies as part of our daily lives, we are unknowingly accepting a centrally controlled financial system, which could, in the near future, give a few immense power over all of us. Does it seem like the global economy is becoming more centralized? A financial system where all transactions, from simple purchases to large transfers, are monitored and controlled by a central authority? We're seeing this happen now, with central banks in developed countries starting to explore and launch their own versions of digital currencies, also known as central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. These projects are being used as a way to improve payment efficiency, but the question that arises is, what is the real cost of having a fully digitalized financial system? Digital currencies are not just an alternative to traditional currencies. They have the potential to completely redefine how money circulates in the world. When governments and central banks directly control digital currency, they have the ability to monitor, track, and even limit how people use their money. Each transaction made with a digital currency can be monitored in real time, and if the system is not properly regulated or falls into the wrong hands, control over people's economic lives will become absolute. Can you see the impact of this on your life? In the future, it could be possible that authorities decide what you can buy, how much you can spend, and even where you can go, all based on the digital control of your currency. Now, imagine a world where your financial identity and actions are directly tied to a digital currency. Every purchase you make, every transaction you conduct could be controlled and recorded by a centralized system. Do you think that, with the move towards a digital currency system, there will come a point where the state will be able to intervene in your life more directly than ever? This is the type of future we are moving towards, where financial transactions cease to be personal and private, becoming part of a globally supervised system. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum started with the promise of decentralization, where no central authority would have control. But central bank digital currencies are creating a very different system, where the central authority is in full control. This new system promises greater security, but it also presents significant risks of surveillance and control. And if we're talking about a system that can be used to track everything, the big question is, how free will we be in a world with a completely digitalized financial system? Total control of digital currencies could also allow for a form of economic coercion that would be practically impossible in a traditional financial system. With centralization, the government or the financial institution issuing the currency can restrict transactions or even block entire accounts. This could happen in financial crises where authorities decide that certain transactions are no longer allowed, or that the economy needs to be frozen to avoid a deeper collapse. Imagine a world where your access to your own money could be determined by a government or a central bank. Additionally, the growing use of digital currencies also paves the way for what could be the end of financial privacy. Imagine a system where every purchase you make is recorded and available to those controlling the system. Your ability to spend your money, what you buy, and where you buy it could be observed, analyzed, and even influenced. Are you ready for a world where your spending is under constant and total surveillance? What really makes digital currencies so powerful is their ability to integrate the global financial system. Digital currencies will allow for a complete integration of financial markets, enabling even more rigorous control over money. In a future scenario, with digital currencies becoming the global norm, it will be impossible to act without your actions being somehow connected to a central bank or a system that has the power to regulate them. Are you ready for a world where you no longer have complete control over your money? These technological advancements, while they may seem convenient. Create a veil of control that can be used to subject populations to a global surveillance system. What will happen when the control over the money you earn is out of your hands? How could this impact your freedom and privacy? If you want to learn more about the future of digital currencies and how it will impact the global economic system, download our exclusive ebook. Inside, you will find a detailed analysis of the effects of these digital currencies on your economic and financial future. Now, with the growth of digital currencies, global financial control issues begin to intertwine with biblical prophecies about the end times. What does the Bible say about a global economic system and its connection to the signs of the times? The increase in financial surveillance and centralized control could be the key to understanding how global events are aligning with prophecies. Are you ready to understand how global events are connecting with biblical prophecies? In the next topic, we will explore how natural disasters, political tensions, and other events are aligning with prophecies about the end times. Stay tuned to discover what the Bible says about the near future.